Hello everyone, and welcome to our lesson on the effects of racial stereotyping. My name is Priyansha, and I'm here to guide you through the lesson on how racial stereotyping can affect the person and how it can affect society. So let's start off with what critical race theory is. So essentially, it's a theoretical framework in the social sciences that uses a critical theory to examine society, culture, as they relate to categorizations of race, law, and power. And this kind of relates back to racial stereotyping, because racial stereotyping forms one of the pillars of critical race theory, or can act as an example of critical race theory being implemented. What is racial stereotyping and how does it affect people? So racial stereotyping is essentially defined as a system of beliefs about a culture, status, a race, heritage, etc., etc. The list goes on. But how does it affect people? According to an article published by The Nation's Health, racial stereotyping can lead to low self-esteem issues, which can eventually lead to weight gain and loss of confidence, which, knowing and living in the society that we do today, a loss of confidence and low self-esteem is not going to be your friend. So the origins of racial stereotyping origin from blackface, which is was a pretty common thing back a couple of years ago. And so in an article published by the National History of African American Culture, these blackface routines, I guess, would be used as entertainment or comedic performances of blackness by whites in exaggerated costumes and makeup, which cannot be separated fully from racial derision and stereotyping at its core, because these blackface entertainment performances would be incredibly disrespectful to the entire race and the culture. So racial stereotyping throughout the year. So on the left we have the Democratic platform, the Republican platform. It's essentially a poster trying to promote voting or trying to promote political activity. And so the Democratic platform is represented by a well-educated or a civilized-looking man, whereas the Republican platform is represented by a clearly disfigured African-American man who is depicted as uneducated or uncivilized, which is incredibly disrespectful to African Americans in general. But now we move over to more modern examples of racial stereotyping, and so on the side we see stand up against racial stereotypes, yet there's an Asian child holding up an F. Kind of defeats the purpose of racial stereotyping and standing up to it. It's a little bit ironic, but what can you do? And then the stereotypes in mass media. So we turn to our favorite shows and our favorite movies, like 16 Candles, Family Guy, The Blind Side, the list goes on. But usually characters in all of these shows and movies have pretty, ethnic or racial stereotyping about them. For example, 16 Candles, Long Duck Dong is an Asian exchange student that comes to live with Molly Ringwald's family. He's constantly made fun of through over-exaggerated Asian accents. He's always kind of seen as this really slow character who speaks in incredibly broken English, kind of always being messed around with. And we see kind of similar themes in Family Guy. Whereas we look at a movie, The Blind Side, which is essentially fighting against racial stereotyping, which is moving us in a positive direction. Michael, our character, the main character, he's a large African-American man. People are intimidated by him. Yet Sandra Bullock comes out and she promotes supporting him, which is a great message to have, especially in this day and age. So let's move on to the novels. Passing by Nella Larson. So essentially what Passing is about, it's two estranged childhood friends, Irene and Claire. They haven't seen each other in a long time. They both come from mixed heritage, African American and white. However, when they meet up again, Irene quickly comes to the realization that Claire, her old best friend, is completely different, because Claire has completely transformed herself into a 100% Caucasian woman. She's completely obscured the side of her that has the African American blood, African American heritage, in order to live a fuller and better life, in her opinion, with her rich husband and her well-groomed children, because in her opinion that wouldn't have happened if she were of mixed heritage. So this kind of plays into the topic of racial stereotyping, because again, why would Claire want to change her life or change herself if she didn't or wasn't in fear of being discriminated against because of her heritage, because of her, because of who she is. So that's why she had to change so drastically. And eventually even the plotline leads up to her being killed by either her husband or Irene the Little Fuzzy, because her husband finds out that she is not 100% white, and as an incredibly racist man, he gets enraged and he might have pushed her off a building to her death. The world may never know. So How to Kill a Mockingbird, it's a very common theme, it's a very largely known book, but essentially what happens is Tom Robinson is an African-American resident in the town of Macomb, which is a predominantly white town, and so he gets convicted of rape by Mayella Ewell, who is a white woman in this predominantly white town. And so essentially what happens is that they're in the courtroom, they're in the case, and Atticus Finch, Robinson's lawyer, presents evidence that cannot be argued in any way, yet even then Robinson is convicted and charged guilty of rape. And so the entire court case, the entire book is based off of a racial stereotype, because the entire town automatically believes that Robinson is the one who raped her, no questions asked. Regardless of the evidence that was presented, majority of the town still believed that he was the one who raped her and even killed him at the end of the book. And so that's a clear-cut example of racial stereotyping in a society. But let's come back to society now. But it's getting better, which is good. So we have movies like Crazy Rich Asians and Happily Ever After that really promote culture, they really promote race, and they're fighting the ethnic stereotypes. And this is just a really great sign for us, and that it's getting better, which is good news. And so this is the end. Our sources are at the very, very end there in the next slide. Thank you for sticking with us through our lesson. And here are our sources.